the uninvited. The neon lights of the convenience store flickered against the rain-slicked streets, casting an eerie glow upon the deserted road. Inside, the solitary cashier, a young man named David, sat hunched over the counter, his eyes heavy with fatigue. The graveyard shift was always the most grueling, the hours dragging on like an endless loop of fluorescent lights and the monotonous hum of the refrigerator. As the clock ticked past midnight, David's mind began to wander, conjuring up images of warm beds and steaming cups of coffee. He was jolted out of his reverie by the sudden creak of the front door. A shiver ran down his spine as he peered into the gloom, his heart pounding in his chest. A tall, shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its face obscured by the hood of a tattered coat. The figure moved with an unsettling stillness, its eyes glinting with an unnatural light. David's breath caught in his throat as he realized he was alone, trapped in the store with this unwelcome visitor. "Well, well, well," the figure rasped, its voice a chilling whisper. "What do we have here? A lone cashier, ripe for the picking." David's heart pounded like a drum in his chest. He tried to speak, to form some kind of response, but his voice was frozen in his throat. The figure advanced, its movements predatory, its eyes fixed on David with an insatiable hunger. "Don't be afraid," the figure purred, its voice dripping with malice. "I'm just here to play a little game." David's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. But the store was locked down, and the only exit was through the front door, where the figure stood. He felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins, his instincts screaming at him to flee, but where could he go? The night was dark and empty, and the figure was relentless. David was trapped, a pawn in this twisted game of terror. The figure lunged, its hands outstretched like claws. David ducked just in time, the fiend's grasp brushing against his cheek as they sailed past. He stumbled back, his heart pounding in his ears, the stench of decay washing over him. The figure laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that echoed through the store. "You can't escape me," it hissed. "I'm always watching, always waiting." David's mind was a whirlwind of fear. He couldn't escape. He couldn't fight back. He was doomed to meet a gruesome end at the hands of this monstrous creature. As the figure drew nearer, David closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But the blow never came. Instead, he heard a deafening roar, a sound that shook the very foundation of the store. He opened his eyes, cautiously peering into the darkness. The figure was gone, vanished without a trace. In its place stood a hulking mass of fur and fangs, a creature of nightmares. The creature roared again, its eyes glowing with an infernal light. It lunged at David, its jaws snapping mere inches from his face. David screamed, his voice lost in the creature's deafening bellow. He scrambled for his life, dodging the creature's razor-sharp claws. He leaped over the counter, knocking over shelves and sending merchandise crashing to the floor. The creature pursued him relentlessly, its hot breath singeing his skin. David ran blindly, stumbling through the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest, his legs burning with exertion. He didn't dare look back, not even for a second. The creature's horrifying roar still echoed in his ears, and he could feel its breath on his neck. He ran until his lungs ached and his legs threatened to give out. Finally, he spotted a small, run-down motel in the distance. He stumbled towards it, his legs collapsing beneath him as he reached the front door. He pounded on the door, screaming for help. A moment later, a bleary-eyed man opened the door. He stared at David, his eyes wide with surprise. "What's wrong?" the man asked, his voice laced with concern. "There's something out there," David gasped, his voice shaking with fear. "Something evil." The man looked at David skeptically, but then he saw the terror in his eyes. He nodded and ushered David inside. David collapsed onto a bed, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. He closed his eyes and tried to forget the horror he had just witnessed. But sleep eluded him. The creature's image was burned into his mind, its glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws haunting his dreams. As the night wore on, David's anxiety grew. He kept a watchful eye on the door, convinced that the creature would come for him. Finally, dawn broke. David emerged from the motel, his body stiff and sore from the night's events. He was exhausted, but he felt a sense of relief. He had survived the night. He walked back to the convenience store, his heart pounding in his chest. As he approached, he saw that the store was in ruins, its windows shattered and its shelves overturned. The creature had done this. It had returned to the scene of its crimes, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. David stared at the wreckage, his mind reeling with fear and disbelief. He couldn't believe that he had survived such a terrifying ordeal. He knew that he would never forget the night he faced the creature. The memory would haunt him forever, a reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the world.